Welcome back to Close Up. There are a lot of Democrats out there looking for a fresh face, someone younger to carry the party's agenda forward and win back the White House. Perhaps the youngest potential 2020 contender is Congressman Eric Swalwell, who is back in New Hampshire and joining us this morning on Close Up. Congressman, thanks for being here.
Of course.
Appreciate it. So before we look too far into the future, let's take a look at the president and the present. The president's former attorney, Michael Cohen, pleading guilty, being sentenced, going to prison, guilty, violating campaign finance law, tax evasion, making false statements to Congress. This is not necessarily uncharted territory for a White House, but this doesn't happen very often. What do you see as the end game here?
Well, we're living under a criminal presidency, and we're seeing that the campaign, the transition, and this presidency have all been under criminal investigations. People have either pled guilty, are going to prison, or have had jury trials where there have been convictions for their conduct in one or all three of those different entities. And up until the midterms, many of us just felt powerless. Like, you know, there were these abuses of power and we couldn't do anything to stop them. Fortunately, people moved their feet from the town squares to the town hall to the ballot box, and we're not powerless anymore. So a new Congress, we can certainly intervene, protect the American people with our oversight responsibilities, and do all we can to make sure that the rule of law still means something in our country.
Cohen and the illegal payments are just one legal front facing the presidency right now. You've said that it's time to launch substantive investigations of this White House. Do you think there's a potential here to kind of muddy the waters in any way between the Mueller investigation and what might go on in Congress, that the president would then use to his advantage and say, hey, look at this, they're just all out to get me?
Well, I'm going to lead, and my colleagues are going to lead with collaboration. There are opportunities on infrastructure, immigration, reducing the cost of prescription drugs, and reducing gun violence. And here we are just on Friday, you know, it was the 6-year anniversary of Sandy Hook, and we've done nothing. But there's opportunities based on what the president has offered before to work on those issues. But yes, the days of presidential immunity are over, and we're not going to give him a free pass on the many abuses of power. There's going to be a balance of power against these many abuses of power.
The president says the people, quote, would revolt if there's impeachment. What do you read into that?
Well, you know, the people want to have a leader in the White House, someone who can unite us around issues that lift us up. And he tried to goad us into talking about impeachment during the 2018 midterms. Candidates talked about what most Americans care about: health care, making sure their paychecks are protected from going to paying for tax cuts to folks at the top floor and not for everyone else on every other floor, and reducing corruption. Those were the three issues people cared the most about. We didn't talk about impeachment, but now that we have this responsibility, as I said, we're not going to lead with impeachment, but we're not going to look the other way. Adam, he might be impeached. I mean, he has so much exposure. His organization, his foundation, his transition, his campaign, and his presidency are all under investigation right now. But again, we can't miss that the American people really want to know, does their hard work add up to something, and can they look at their kids and dream bigger? And that should be the focus of most of our work.
Let's talk about the issues quickly here. You've been out in front on the gun issue. You've called for a very ambitious buyback program, but in part of that, and including that, or bringing back the assault weapons ban, you've also called for criminal prosecution of people who don't participate. How is that constitutional?
Yeah, I want us to be bold in the solutions that we offer. And with assault weapons, even if we banned future sales and manufacturing, we would leave 15 million across the country. So it would be over 100 years before they were out of circulation. I want our kids to be safe in their schools. Now, it's constitutional because it would be a buyback, so you get around the takings clause issues. We have 15 million of them. I'm proposing a $1,000 buyback, and then to restrict use to licensed hunting clubs and gun clubs. But kids today in high schools are telling me that their right to learn, their right to go home, and their right to live is greater than any other right in the Constitution. And I also believe that the biggest threat to the Second Amendment is doing nothing. If you want to preserve the Second Amendment for hunting, protecting your house, and shooting for sport, we should put in place common sense gun violence measures.
Of course, some Americans do see firearms as the guarantors of their liberty, and then we have other people who are saying essentially, you know, military-style weapons that they consider tools of murder, essentially. How do you move policy forward when there are two such disparate sides here, trying to find that American middle way? Is that even possible anymore?
You know, what's amazing is that the American people have actually already already arrived on what they think the solutions are. And we heard in the exit polls from the midterms that gun violence prevention was top of mind for many voters. And so 90% of Americans want background checks on firearm purchases. Most gun owners agree that you should have to look at someone's mental health history to see if they should be able to buy a firearm. Most Americans think that we should study the research behind gun violence to see what we can do on mental illness. So I think Americans have consensus. They just don't see leadership in Washington.
Let's shift gears to 2020 a little bit here. What considerations are in play for you as you decide whether to run for president?
I've got 2 kids under 2 and a wife who has a pretty good job that she's worked hard at, and I know it's going to be a sacrifice for them. But when I look at what Americans want today, I think they want to see our leaders go big, be bold, and do good. And as a 38-year-old who's been in Congress going on 4 terms, I've been in the mix of these fights for our democracy after Russia interfered. I'd be one of the candidates with the most national security experience. But my wife and I'm the oldest of 4 boys, first in the family to go to college, son of a cop. We're still connected to the American struggle. And so understanding that people expect that their hard work pays off and means something. I don't know if many candidates can identify with everyday Americans, but I also am from a generation that believes that if you unleash their potential, we can find a healthcare guarantee, green our grid, build modern schools in every community, and address the issues of money in politics and gun violence. They want to see us offer bold solutions. And so I see myself as a candidate that can do that. I'm going to spend time with my Republican family members, all Republican family actually, over the holidays and make a decision after the first of the year.
Okay, so January is when we should be looking for?
Yeah, sometime in the first of the year. I don't want to put a date on it because there's going to be a lot of work in the first 100 days on the Judiciary and Intelligence Committee, but before the first quarter of the year ends, I will know what I'm going to do. And I know that the responsibility that New Hampshire has is one that its people take very seriously, and I look forward to coming back and listening to people in the Granite State.
You mentioned you're 38. That's just a hair over the constitutional threshold there of 35. What do you say to people who kind of look at your side long and say, well, don't you think you might need a little bit more experience?
Yeah, and I won't hold against any of the other candidates, their lack of national security experience compared to mine, because I've been on the Homeland Security Committee for 2 years, and then going into my 3rd term on the Intelligence Committee. And I've gone, to the war zones. I've stood up for 7 years in an Oakland courtroom fighting for homicide victims. I've been a city council member. I've been a congressman that's gone across the country listening to young people. So I've seen this country. I've seen want. I've seen grit. And I have ideas to lift up the lives of every person, not just folks at the top.
Do you need more executive experience, though? I mean, this is something I think a lot of Democrats, obviously we have an outsider president right now. If Democrats are looking for somebody who can be ready on day one, how would they theoretically know that you're that guy?
Well, being in Congress going on my 4th term, I think the American people want somebody who knows how to make Washington work for their lives. They want to believe that government can help them. And I think Donald Trump has just been a wrecking ball and has really, just taken a wrecking ball to the rule of law, to democracy. He doesn't really understand how government works. And so somebody who understands, why the gridlock's happening and what we can do to unleash that potential for this next generation.
You mentioned the importance of New Hampshire. You're a native of Iowa. Has it sunk in yet, coming around New Hampshire, that the Granite State doesn't necessarily have the highest opinion of the Iowa caucuses? There's the old adage here, Iowa picks corn, New Hampshire picks presidents.
That's right. Well, I've spent a lot of time in Iowa. I love this state. I was here in 2004 in Nashua for Wesley Clark, sleeping in a house that had no heat with 13 other volunteers helping people get to the pancake breakfast. I have a lot of respect for the duty and responsibility that people in this state have to pick presidents.
What about the conversation that's going on right now, especially in the Democratic Party, about these early voting states and the relative lack of diversity here? Is that a problem in your eyes?
Well, what I want to do is make sure that, every American has an opportunity to, be a part of this process. And so that's why I'm going to not just Iowa and New Hampshire. In the last 2 years, I've been to Alabama, I've been to Indiana, I've been to Tennessee. I want to see this country and, really understand what people believe the American promise is and where it's not being fulfilled. And that's something that if I ran, I'd want to do.
Are there any other, because we could see potentially 2-3 dozen Democrats get into this. Is there anyone else out there that could affect your plans for what you want to do?
No, not a single person except my wife and those 2 kids. But, we have a deep, deep talent pool. And whoever is elected, of the folks who are considering running today. No one could be worse than what we have right now. And it's not about a single policy. It's just about, the dignity of the office and the values of our country, putting American values above personal transactions. I think we want to get back to a president who leads our country in that way.
One last policy question here. You mentioned your experience on House Intel with Russia. What should the policy posture be towards Vladimir Putin and Russia once America does get past this difficult period here?
Yeah, stand up for our democracy and work with our allies to isolate Russia until they want to come and be a responsible country at the table of nations.
All right. Congressman Eric Swalwell, we thank you for your time.
Appreciate it.
Hope to see you back here.
Yeah, we will.